All right, well, as you can see, we are not in the studio today. The lush background, thanks to Laguna, California. We are at Fortune's Brainstorm Green Conference. Fortune's managing editor, Andy Serwer, here to chat with us. And I want to just cut through the BS, if you will, to the reality of companies that are actually green in a meaningful way. Because you got a lot of big-name companies that say, we're green, this is what we're doing. But, Andy, are we really seeing a revolution here?
Well, you know, it's a slow and steady one. And if you take a step back, though, Poppy, and think about it, I mean, at first, going all the way back to the 60s, you know, there were radical environmentalists, and companies wouldn't even talk to them. I mean, they wouldn't pay attention to them. These people were radicals. They were someone that you'd kept at a very, very far away distance. You know, gradually some companies began to see the light a little bit, but, you know, companies didn't really begin to embrace environmentalism, clean tech, sustainability until really this past decade. And, you know, I'll point to a really interesting point, I think, which is when Wal-Mart began to embrace the fact that these issues were for real. And, you know, we just heard Lee Scott here speak. He was the CEO of Wal-Mart from 2000 to 2009. And he talked about, you know, he had this idea that, you know, being good for the environment was good for business. And when Wal-Mart said, you know what, there's actually a lot to be gained here, I think a lot of other companies came on board.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at even some coal companies, Duke Energy, which is a huge energy company. They're one of the biggest coal companies, so carbon emitters in this country. Jim Rogers, the CEO there, has been behind the green movement for quite a long time, working on that while also, you know, still mining for coal. The question is, when it comes to cap and trade, the words that businessmen and women that lead these companies don't necessarily want to talk about, and a climate bill in Washington, do you think we'll see the support behind it?
Well, you know, again, take a step back. I mean, the whole point is to reduce carbon emissions. First of all, you have to believe in climate change and global warming. And I think that most people, most business leaders actually do believe in that. Having said that, how do we do that? How do we reduce carbon emissions? And, you know, the people who like to push back say slowly. And the market should do that. The government shouldn't be involved. And the leading environmentalists say, no, we need to do it aggressively, and the government has to be a big player here. So those are the two endpoints of the discussion. And then you have a whole spectrum of beliefs in between. You know, when you talk about cap and trade legislation, what that means is you're having people in business who are willing to discuss the fact that, yes, the government does need to be a player in this, and in fact, we do need legislation to jumpstart this from happening. And so just by virtue of the fact that we're having this discussion means that businesses are, you know, getting behind this. Now, you know, it falls in and out of favor. You know, you have a cold winter and everyone says, oh, forget it.
Donald Trump said something to that effect to me last week. Well, it snowed a lot in Washington. And
well, that's kind of short-sighted. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, if you look at the data, you know, decades have been getting warmer since the 1970s. And, you know, if we don't do anything, you know, there's going to be, you know, cataclysmic effects. I mean, Paul Krugman just had a piece, the cover story in the New York Times Sunday Magazine about the economics of reducing carbon emissions. And, you know, one thing, for instance, that he pointed out is that people say it's very, very expensive, but what they forget to say or forget to acknowledge is that during the process there'll be all sorts of innovation that will lower the costs of capping carbon.
And have you seen businesses, and this conference has been going on for a few years now, have you seen businesses getting on board more and more each year at this conference, big businesses?
I have, you know, and I think that it, you know, ebbs and flows a little bit, and there's some companies that are a little bit more, you know, on the bandwagon than others. I mean, you take ExxonMobil, they're a little less of a true believer, I think, than, you know, say Duke is. But, you know, slowly, gradually, the scientific, you know, knowledge and data is there. I think they're coming around more and more and willing to have an open discussion. And, you know, if you want to be a player here, if you want to be at the table, you got to sit down and talk. And I think everyone's coming to realize that.